high and had them stashed somewhere, right?
Well, they were very special.
Yeah.
And they weren't staying at my house, but I invited them over for a swim. And
For decades, America believed it knew Doris Day. With her sunlit smile, warm voice, and wholesome movie roles, she was the embodiment of innocence, Hollywood's good girl who never stumbled, never darkened, never broke. But behind the glowing poster image, behind the polished interviews and radio-perfect laugh, Doris was living a secret life that almost no one, not even those closest to her, fully understood. It wasn't a scandal splashed across newspapers, not an affair whispered about in studios. It was a second identity, shaped by pain, survival, and decisions she made far from the spotlight. For 30 years, Doris Day carried truths that clashed violently with her public image. She wasn't just an actress and singer adored by millions. She was a woman battling betrayals, financial ruin, shattered trust, and a private emotional world she guarded like a fortress. While fans saw her as carefree and untouched by darkness, Doris spent decades hiding a storm few people would have ever imagined. Even those who worked alongside her for years later admitted they had no idea who she really was beneath the kindness and professionalism. The truth didn't emerge until after she was well past fame, when private documents, testimonies from silenced insiders, and long-buried memories finally surfaced. What they revealed shocked even Hollywood historians. Doris Day had not only been deceived by men she trusted most, but she also quietly rebuilt herself from ashes more than once. She had walked through years of emotional captivity, while smiling for cameras and recording songs that soothed the world. And now, after 30 years of secrecy, the curtain is finally being pulled back. What was Doris Day hiding? Why did she live two separate lives? And how did she manage to protect her truth for so long? The answers change everything we thought we knew about her. The world met Doris Day as a symbol of light. From the moment she stepped onto the silver screen in the late 1940s, audiences embraced her as a refreshing force, sunny, charming, untouched by the darkness that seemed to cling to Hollywood. She smiled in every photograph, glided through musical numbers with effortless poise, and delivered romantic comedies with a warmth that made people believe in kindness again. Yet beneath that golden glow was a story that even her most devoted fans never imagined. Doris was not simply an actress. She was an expert at hiding wounds, and the life she lived behind closed doors bore almost no resemblance to the one America adored. Long before fame, Doris Mary Kappelhoff learned the silent language of pain. Born in Cincinnati in 1922, she dreamed not of movie screens but dance studios. Graceful movement was her first love, the art form where she felt free. But fate intervened on a quiet October evening in 1937, when a car accident shattered her leg and ended the future she had imagined. Doctors told her she might never walk the same way again. Just like that, her dream of becoming a professional dancer disappeared. Most people remember Doris as eternally cheerful, untouched by hardship. But that moment and the years of recovery that followed sealed the first part of her double life. The public face of optimism balanced against a private existence built on loss. Music arrived as her second chance. Confined to her bed, she began singing along to the radio, learning how to stretch her voice the way dancers stretch muscle. A producer soon discovered her, and by the age of 17, she was touring as a band vocalist. Her voice carried innocence, but inside she was already learning that survival requires reinvention. Touring introduced her to smoky rooms, men twice her age, and a level of attention she wasn't prepared to process. Yet she smiled through it, creating a pattern she would follow for decades, be everything the world needed. Even if she was breaking in silence, Hollywood amplified that divide. With films like Pillow Talk and Calamity Jane, Doris became the nation's sweetheart. Directors adored her reliability. Co-stars admired her professionalism. Every magazine cover painted her as carefree perfection, a woman living a fairy tale others could only dream about. But away from cameras, her private world was tightening into a vice. Her marriages were collapsing behind her front door. Her first husband, Al Jordan, was violent and jealous, a far cry from the happily ever after fans believed she embodied. Her second marriage failed too, and each betrayal carved deeper shadows beneath her glowing exterior. When she smiled on screen, she wasn't celebrating life. She was surviving it. What made Doris different from so many others was her discipline. She understood that image was currency, and she guarded hers fiercely. She rarely revealed vulnerability, even to close friends. Reporters asked about love, about dreams, about her future, and she answered gently, coyly, like someone floating on clouds. But inside, she feared losing everything she had built. She feared public judgment. Above all, she feared that if people saw who she really was, scarred, uncertain, mistrusting, they might stop loving her. So she built a second life, a private world where the truth lived locked away from the tabloids. As the years passed, Doris Day perfected this double existence. The woman America saw lived in romantic comedies, laughing brightly and singing as though the universe were painted in pastel colors. The woman history would later uncover was struggling through heartbreak, financial manipulation, and emotional exhaustion. But in those early Hollywood years, she still believed she could keep the worlds separate forever. She still believed that silence was protection. She still believed that the shareable version of her life mattered more than the honest one. As Doris Day rose further into Hollywood legend status, the walls separating her two lives grew taller, thicker, and harder to climb. Audiences saw a woman blessed with charm and perfect timing, someone who smiled effortlessly at premieres, who glowed beneath studio lighting, who seemed to glide through interviews without a single crack in her voice. Yet by the mid-1950s, Doris was living in a pattern that would define the next 30 years, the world-famous icon outside, and the wounded, cautious woman inside. The public adored America's sweetheart, but friends who visited her home noticed a different energy. Behind her laughter, there was a guarded stillness in her eyes, the look of someone who slept lightly, always waiting for something to go wrong. That fear was rooted largely in her marriages. Her first husband, Al Jordan, had scarred her deeply. His jealousy and violence were so intense that Doris later confessed she feared for her life. This trauma followed her silently everywhere she went, even into scenes where she played confident, independent women. The public saw empowerment. Doris felt echoes of control and isolation. Her second marriage to saxophonist George Weidler ended almost as quietly as it began, dissolving under pressure and conflicting ambitions. But it was her third husband, Martin Melcher, who shaped the darkest part of her hidden life. On screen, she was the bright heroine audiences adored. At home, she was a wife trying and struggling to understand a man whose decisions would later devastate her. Melcher became her manager, a gatekeeper between Doris and the outside world. He told her where to go, what to sign, and how her name would be used. He negotiated the contracts that made her wealthier than most Hollywood stars of the era. Yet Doris never truly saw the numbers. She trusted him blindly. Trust was her weakness, a soft spot she never allowed the public to see. She needed to believe in someone after years of heartbreak, so she clung to her husband's promises. Meanwhile, he was quietly building a financial empire in her name one that she knew nothing about. Her daily life began dividing into layers. There was the public Doris, always camera-ready, politely answering questions about love and marriage while reporters whispered about how enviably happy she seemed. Then there was the private Doris walking through a home filled with silence and paperwork, signing documents she didn't fully understand, trying to maintain the image her career demanded. Friends later recalled moments when she paused mid-conversation, staring distantly as if trying to decide whether to admit how frightened she really was. But she never did. She had built her early success through discipline, and she feared vulnerability could destroy everything. Hollywood directors noticed changes too. Doris worked harder, stayed later, and double-checked every scene. It was as if she was determined to control the one space she still felt safe work. On set, she wasn't the woman whose finances were being mishandled or whose home felt unsteady. She was a star delivering perfection. Yet, privately, her marriage was turning into a cage. Melcher was managing her business, but he was also managing her freedom. He chose roles for her without asking, signed off on projects she didn't approve, and placed her into television ventures simply because they profited him. She would later discover that while she was performing with enthusiasm, Melcher was making decisions that would leave her bankrupt. People around her saw the double life more clearly than she realized. Some said she looked thinner. Others said she seemed distracted, her radiant optimism replaced by polite distance. She rarely spoke about the pressure at home, but she didn't need to. her silence spoke loudly. And yet, even in this growing storm, Doris continued to hide the truth. To the world, she was still a fairy tale. She was still the happy ending everyone needed, especially in a Hollywood era darkened by scandals and broken careers. What no one expected was that Martin Melcher's financial manipulation would not only shatter Doris emotionally, it would expose the secret life her son, Terry Melcher, became her lifeline. While Doris had always been protective of him, treating him as the anchor of her world, now he became the one guiding her through shock and confusion. Together, they uncovered Melcher's hidden files, contracts, loan papers, legal documents written in cold, manipulative language. Doris learned she was signed to star in a television series she had never approved. She learned millions of dollars were missing. She learned that Martin, the man she believed was managing their future, had been quietly gambling with her entire life. The discovery tore through her carefully preserved optimism, replacing innocence with a bitter awareness she had fought to avoid for decades. Friends described her transformation during this period as painful but remarkable. The quiet, gentle woman who once avoided conflict became a fighter. Doris sued her late husband's business partner, Jerome Rosenthal, and the legal battle revealed even more secrets. Melcher and Rosenthal had controlled her career with complete authority, hiding details from her to protect their financial power. Court testimony exposed document after document proving Doris had been left in the dark, even as she worked tirelessly filming, singing, performing to sustain the empire the men built around her name. The public, stunned, watched the mask crumble. For the first time, Doris Day had no choice but to reveal pieces of her hidden life. She told reporters she had been blindsided, that she never wanted a television show, that she was drowning under debt she hadn't created. And, in those moments, the world saw the woman she had buried for 30 years, wounded, furious, and human. Yet she refused to let humiliation swallow her. Instead, she honored the contract Martin had left behind, the contract that forced her to star in the Doris Day Show, even though it had been signed without her permission. She took her grief, her betrayal, and her fear and turned them into survival. Behind the cameras, she was exhausted. Every studio audience laughed she delivered cost her something. But to her, working was the only path forward, the only chance to pay off the debt and reclaim her identity. Her double life was no longer theoretical. It was real. The cheerful performer America adored now existed side by side with a woman rebuilding her life from ashes. The death of Martin Melcher didn't free her. It exposed her. It forced the truth into the open. Doris Day, the smiling, glowing icon, had been living under emotional imprisonment. The world's sweetheart had been controlled, deceived, and financially dismantled by the man she trusted more than anyone. Yet this was only the beginning. Because what came next, the court victories, the transformation, and the reinvention would finally reveal who Doris Day really was when the spotlight went dark. Fame had never been Doris Day's dream. What she had wanted long before Hollywood ever called her name was peace. She once said that if she hadn't become an actress, she would have settled quietly somewhere along a coastline, surrounded by dogs and music, nothing fancy, nothing demanding. But life had other plans. And by the time the cameras discovered her, she was already a woman recovering from wounds. The world would never fully see Dot. Her childhood had been marked by emotional storms that mirrored the unsettled years to come. Her father's betrayal, the discovery of an affair that shattered their family, taught Doris early that trust was fragile. In her teenage years, a devastating car accident destroyed her hopes of becoming a professional dancer. The future she had imagined vanished overnight. It was during her physical recovery that she turned to singing. Her voice, gentle yet commanding, quickly drew the attention of the music world. It wasn't long before Hollywood followed. People assumed her cheerful on-screen persona reflected real life. But the truth was almost the opposite. Doris carried private fears that grew with each hit film, each chart-topping song. Success felt like a cage golden, yes, but just as suffocating as any other prison. Her marriages reflected that struggle. Her first marriage to Al Jordan, an abusive trombonist, nearly cost her life. He threatened to kill her more than once. She fled, choosing survival over love. Her second marriage provided little comfort, ending before she truly found stability. And then came Martin Melcher. Melcher promised safety, commitment, and guidance. For years, he managed her career and her money. Doris trusted him. She believed him. She loved him deeply. In public, she appeared devoted, loyal, and grateful. But behind the camera, their marriage was filled with tension and secrecy. Melcher pushed her relentlessly, signing contracts she did not fully understand. He locked her into projects she never wanted. Even in her greatest roles, she felt cornered by decisions she never approved. Still, she stayed. She believed in loyalty, in marriage, in the idea that eventually life would calm around her. When Melcher unexpectedly died in 1968, Doris was thrown into a storm she never saw coming. She discovered the truth. He had left her bankrupt. He had spent nearly every dollar she had earned. Behind her back, he had signed business deals, created investments under her name, and gambled away a fortune. She was left with no money and a shocking contract forcing her into a television show she never wanted to do. It was the lowest point of her life. Doris Day, America's sweetheart, living a lie the public had never suspected. Her television career began not out of passion, but out of necessity. She was nearly 50, grieving, financially damaged, terrified, and forced back into the spotlight she desperately wanted to escape. The show exhausted her emotionally, but she refused to let the world see her crumble. She fought back the only way she knew how. She filed lawsuits, seeking justice against those who had robbed her. And surprisingly, she won, earning millions in damages. But money had never truly mattered to her. What she gained was something far more valuable: independence. For the first time in decades, she was no longer controlled by a husband, a studio, or an agent. This turning point revealed the depth of Doris Day's double life. For the public, she was a symbol of sunshine, glowing, innocent, impossibly happy. For those close to her, she was a survivor. She had endured violence, manipulation, betrayal, and a level of exploitation that would have destroyed most people. But she refused to surrender her values. Her kindness remained intact. As she stepped into her later years, she finally began shaping her world according to her own desires. She built an animal rescue foundation, pouring her heart into saving creatures others ignored. She removed herself from Hollywood completely. She stopped dating. She stopped acting. She stopped pretending. She chose solitude, gardens, and the sound of ocean waves. And yet, there was one truth she never shared publicly. She sometimes regretted fame. She believed Hollywood had stolen something precious: her privacy, her peace, and the version of herself she might have become. She once admitted in a rare interview, "I loved the work, but I never loved the attention." In those quiet later years, Doris Day lived more honestly than she ever had before. The double life was finally over, but the emotional cost had been extraordinary. Her story, once hidden beneath laughter and love songs, revealed a portrait of a woman far stronger, far more complex, and far more human than Hollywood ever allowed the world to see.